Welcome back to the Abundant Harvest Homestead. Mistakes and mistakes, operator error. Me, that was the problem. Lit this thing on fire. Now you see it's still there. That's not... One of my children said, "Dad, you've got a lot of flames coming out the back of your smokehouse." And then I also cut my head open, took a small chunk almost completely out of it. Thankfully, I was able to put it back on the top of my head, and that was my problem too. One of the first things I did, okay, let's think. Monday, I lit this on fire and cut my head open. Thursday, I drove up to Missouri, and while I was there, I told my friend who we built a clone for this for, here's my problems that I created for myself. Do not do this. So in case anyone's been following along with this thing, it changed my life. It's such a benefit. Things are absolutely amazing. We had 6 families over here, I think, on Tuesday. Yeah. And an extra 34 people were over at our house. And I had made some chicken in that smokehouse. And people were like, "How did you season that?" And I'm like, you know, have you heard of salt? I mean, Pinky Pepper made a homemade seasoned salt, but that was not the flavor they were talking about. This was the source of that flavor, the smokehouse. That has been insane. I actually got some, had some for breakfast. I had some unleavened bread with some smoked chicken in there, absolutely amazing. I was enjoying some smoked carp last night. That stuff is amazing. I can't believe that man has been duped into thinking that's a trash fish. Fins and scales, God knows best. So delicious out of here. But let's talk about what went wrong, what I did wrong twice, and how I wound up with this on fire and my head sliced open, me just applying incredible pressure to prevent blood from running all over my face. And before we get started, big shout out to Big Family Expedition for keeping me clothed today, allowing me to represent them. And I'll tell you what, Kenny from Big Family Expedition came out and helped me build this thing. And he's part of the reason my life was changed. Wasn't his fault, these things happened, that was mine. I'll explain why. Let's go inside. So I have a video on the build of this thing. And on the build of this thing, I show how I put in the floor. The floor is fine, but I've got something on the floor over the time I've used it. I emptied this out once, I think, already. Or I emptied the fire pit out, but the floor is basically supposed to be flat. Then there is a high row of rocks that are higher than the floor around the edge of it, and then there's a recess in there, and down in there is supposed to be the coals. And when I reach over and grab my logs from over here, I'm supposed to set them down in a hole in the floor. But I have been fire without emptying the coals. So kind of the same thing I got going on over there. You can see there's a mound of ashes. That's what I have going on here. So when I had my fire going and we were smoking a whole goat at once up here, it was fantastic, incredible, especially because we didn't season it at all. We just smoked it in here. It was absolutely incredible. Nice fire going down here, rolling just over 200 for a lot of it. But what the problem was, is the fire was up here. So one of my round logs rolled from where it was here, as it was on fire, back down to the wall and lit that wall on fire. That was a problem. How could I have fixed this? Well, there's two things. First of all, if I would empty the ashes and keep this thing a pit like I was supposed to, that would have never happened. You guys can probably see right out of it, and I put that rock there to kind of block a hole. Let's peek behind there quick too. Yeah, there you go. That's a hole straight out the back. And that fire burned through that board, and it went up there, that dark spot of the wall, and it gets harder to see as you head higher because this is all just black up here, but it actually made it up the back wall. If we look from the outside, we'll see the main problem was down there, but there was also a bit, some of this, you know, this was basically how this was from the smoke escaping, but this here is burnt. Oh yeah, that's charcoal right now. So that's all burnt heading up there. The idea of even just having an active fire in the middle of a small wooden building frightens a lot of people, and that's fine. It's good to be concerned. But if this thing would have been properly maintained, which I did not, it would have worked just fine. Now I did have a friend, he's actually the same one who subscriber recommended, Papa approved, suggested I take these brand new hinges and give them a patina, which looks way better. He had told me about a year ago, as I was building this and contemplating different things, he said, do you think you maybe want to take some of the barn tin and just run a barrier around in here, around the edge? That way if a log ever gets away and rolls against it, it's touching metal, not wood. Now, accurately, I said I don't think I need to do that. And I didn't need to do that. If I would have kept things maintained, it would have been fine. But I didn't keep things maintained, did I? That's why I almost lost this thing. And honestly, fire was going in the pit. Fire was going up here. I had a warning cue that I should have been watching. And the thing was, the temp, as I was monitoring it, was around 220, then it dropped to 200, and then it started climbing again. That should have been an indicator to me. I'm like, whoa, it's going back up, cool. No, not cool. Somehow it's getting more fuel without me putting more stuff in it. I should have thought of that and opened and looked, and then I could have shut down earlier. Thankfully, my children have enough sense to let me know right away. Sweet Pepper came in, said, Dad, there's flames coming out the back there. I saw that, came over here and just started splashing water in there. We had the whole goat sitting up here at this level, so I'm shooting under it, behind it, over it, adding a lot of humidity as all that water is steaming and stuff. Got it all put out, threw that rock over the hole, and then continued smoking our goat, which was delicious, which we had that evening, and absolutely just incredible, delicious, amazing. Two things I could have done though to avoid that situation. If I would have just ran that barn tin around the bottom so it had metal contact, not wood, that would have helped. That would have really helped. Number two, the maintenance. So when I got back in, you can see I just kind of added to the pile that was there. I laid my log side to side this way rather than front to back, and I put like a wheel chalk at each side with these rocks so they weren't going anywhere, and we were able to finish it. Now my plan, charred wood that's already been burned is going to ignite a whole lot easier. So I think I'm going to cut some little strips that'll fill in those holes between the boards for the board and batten there, and then I'm going to run another layer over the face of that across that section, just so it's fresh wood there. Not that I'm not taking this stuff down, I'm just going to go over it, and then I'll run a layer of barn tin around the inside of there. And speaking of barn tin, this that you see next to me, that's new. I knew that it was an issue to have the sharp, jagged edge of this just hanging out at that height. But I didn't do anything about it. My children and wife are basically cruising along below there when they're in this area. They're not really over here. Well, I had reached down to grab something from the ground here, and I turned and kind of partially scalped myself. There was a big old triangle here that was flipped up. So it was attached to this dreadlock. If you think about a dreadlock, it unites like one, like my forearm there, but it comes from all these different roots, like my hand there. So it's across that area, dangling off into one, and when I came across here, it took a chunk out of the top of my head. So part of that came up and was attached to a flap of skin that was flipped back and over. The other part's attached here. Some of it, the hair had already been cut there. So I actually just cut the rest of the hair across that area. This has got about half of what it used to that it's hanging on by. So rather than being like this, you know, it's like this now, hanging onto the roots by that. The other part's been cut. And this big old V here, this triangle that was flipped up and back, I plugged that hole forever and managed to stop the bleeding, and then I flipped back down that skin and held that in place, and then hopefully it's going to heal up. But I mean, there's a deep cut right up on top of my head. So once that stopped leaking, and once I got it all together, we took this piece of conduit and I cut that with an angle grinder because I thought it'd go through there real quick and easy. So I just used a cutoff wheel on an angle grinder, and then monster truck, and I slid it down there. So now we've got this nice, easy, you know, no metal edge up there. I'm very glad it was me taking a giant cut out of my head, I'm very glad. I would have felt much worse if it was somebody else, but if I would have done this right away, I would have never had that problem. So, told my buddy, who we basically cloned this smokehouse up in Missouri. In fact, they just did 7 briskets at once up there for the Feast of Unleavened Bread that they're up to. Last fall, we did 11 at once for a wedding, and then last Feast of Tabernacles, we did 5 at once. It's crazy to cook 11 briskets in a thing like this at once. Absolutely insane, absolutely beautiful, so delicious, so tasty. It worked out very well, and this just allows bulk issues so incredibly. We like to smoke just a pile of carp or a pile of chickens when we process our meat birds. Just smoke them all, then put them away. Have them be pre-cooked and amazing and delicious. So anyway, let him know. Do something like that before you cut your head open. Keep your ashes empty. I did not. I've made the mistakes, and I'll be honest about my mistakes. I think if a lot more people were open and honest about the mistakes they've made, those with ears to hear would learn from them. But a lot of people often are proud. They don't want to admit what they did was wrong, and they keep it to themselves and allow other people to kind of follow in their erroneous footsteps. I don't want to do that. If you guys have one of these, absolutely great. Changed my life, way for the better. Love this thing, and I'm glad to have it. And if I did burn it down, I'd build another one. But I don't need to have it be as flammable as it was the other day when it caught fire. That was my fault. So much safer now. Looking forward to the rest of life with it. In fact, we're gathering some folks on Monday for the last day of Unleavened Bread. I'm probably smoking something in here ahead of time, possibly, to bring over there, because life's just better with smoked meat. Anyway, those are my mistakes. Kenny, thank you for helping me build this. Check out Big Family Expedition if y'all have not yet. Boy, that bus is getting ready to set sail. I used to live on a school bus once, so yeah, I appreciate what they're up to. But Smokehouse is still intact. Life is going well. If you do something like this, do it better. Learn from my mistakes. Don't make your own, and we'll see you next time. Papa out.